Hello, everybody. So we all just learned you cannot jump up and down and scream and shout and say, this is the most amazing presentation ever. So that's what I'm going to chalk it up to, and nobody's giving me a standing ovation at the end. We have a disclaimer here. I love this disclaimer. What it doesn't say on the disclaimer is RSA requires us to all put our slides in 2 months in advance. And I was like, well, that's the stupidest thing ever. Security changes so rapidly in 2 months. So know that I might fill in a few things and add some updates along the way as we go. My name is Joe Payne. I'm the president and CEO of Code 42. Quick story, and I've been in security since 2022. At one time held a top secret clearance, but no longer hold that today. But the story is every year, I think I went to my first RSA in 2003, so 21 years ago. And every year since then, I basically submit a speech topic to RSA to be like, I want to be a speaker, you guys got to give me a spot. And every year we get the, your topic's not interesting enough rejection. This year, I was like, okay, what's going to happen? Everybody's going to submit on AI this year, and everybody is going to have an AI topic, and it means 80% of the submissions are going to be about that. So I'm going to submit about something that's actually happening at all our companies in the real world on source code exfiltration, and maybe I'll get picked. And here we are today, and it's a topic that's near and dear to my heart because it's something that my company focuses on at Code 42, and I hope it's interesting for you all. I'm going to try to make it interesting for you all. The other fact that I need to come clean on is that when I came in about a half an hour ago, the team in the back said, hey, Joe, there's a stool on the stage that your team requested for you. And I was like, I'm not that short, okay? I know I'm not 6'4" or whatever, but I am 5'8", 9", somewhere around there. Anyway, the stool's gone. I said, I think I'll be able to manage. Hopefully everybody will be able to see me. But that was the first humiliation of the day. And so hopefully somebody won't ask a question that's the second humiliation of the day. But I am going to save time at the end. If you have any questions, if you want to challenge anything I say, or if you have any examples you want to ask me to talk about, or if you want to go deeper on any topics, think about it, and we'll try to save some time at the end to chat about it, okay? Here's what we're going to talk about. 3 basic things. What does the IP protection market look like today, and specifically around insider threat? And then why is it so hard to manage your source code? It shouldn't be that hard, but actually there's a bunch of challenges around that I want to talk about. And then I actually really like, one thing I want to give RSA credit for is they have this thing that says you should give people what you're going to do about it in your speech, and they give us a format. And the format's interesting because it's not the way I would have done it. It's what should you do about it today? Which I thought, well, that's pretty aggressive because we're all tired from our trade show walking around, all that kind of stuff. But then also, what are you going to do about it in the next 3 months? And so I've got that for you. Hopefully it's helpful. And I do have something that you can do today. Now, before we get started on this, I want to tell you a story, true story that happened at Code 42, and it relates to this whole challenge of source code protection. So about 3.5, 4 years ago, we were bringing out new capabilities at our company to monitor source code exfiltrating from an organization. We have lots of customers that were excited about this and we're using it. And we were at an event announcing this. And I'm standing next to one of my senior engineers as we're going through this, and I'm really giddy and excited. I'm like, we're going to be able to see source code moving to Dropbox, and we're going to see source code moving to Gmail, and we're going to see it move to thumb drive and on AirDrop. This is going to be so great. And the guy next to me is like, uh-huh. And I go, you're surprisingly unexcited about this. And he goes, well, it's not how I would do it. And I was like, it's not how you would do it? And he said, no, it's not how I would do it. Okay, you got me. How would you do it? He said, well, you know how we work in development, Joe. Every day we pull our code from our GitLab repository, corporate, and by the way, that thing's locked down. You got to have certificate on your machine, multi-factor authentication. We've got that repository locked down. But I'm a trusted employee, so I'll be able to pull that code down. I work on my code all day long. And then, at various points in the day, I'm pushing code back into the corporate repository. And I also sometimes make a copy of the code because I like my projects, and who knows if I'm going to be able to use that again. And then I will push that code to my own GitLab account, my personal GitLab account, and I'll be using Git commands to do that. and our product won't see that. And I was like, oh, well, as you're one of their senior developers on our team, why didn't you build that? And he said, well, first of all, no one asked us to build that. The product management team said, build something that watches for source code exfiltration via Gmail and et cetera. And he's like, I like keeping a copy of some of my source code, and that wasn't a thing. And so we laughed. That was 3.5 years ago, and then obviously went and built that capability. And it's the learnings from that, building that capability and rolling that out to lots of customers, that lead to the research that we've developed here and some of the stories that I'll tell you as we go. And I will come back to that story a few times as I'm talking here today, because there's a lot in there. There's a lot to unpack in there about the motivations of people, not only how they do things, but what you have to contend with along the way. Now, before we get right into the source code part, let me talk about the insider threat part. Because all of you have been walking the show, and we've been seeing, malware, ransomware, hackers, etc. And there's an old adage in the insider threat side of the business, which is, hackers don't hack in, they log in. And so I want to just orient your mind to the problem of insider threat just for a second, and then we'll jump into the source code part of it. So when you're looking at risk from the outside of the organization, whether that looks like malware, or that looks like ransomware, etc., you always have a bad actor involved. And so, but on insider risk, it's a friend, it's a colleague, it's somebody who's works down the hall. It's a very different mindset. Because with malware is fast moving. It's constantly propagating. You need to get to that as quickly as possible because it jumps from machine to machine to network to network. But just because Jenny takes some files and puts it in her Gmail, that doesn't mean that John all of a sudden is going to start doing that. That's not the way it works with insider risk. And so how you respond is very differently, because with a piece of malware, you're going to isolate it, you're going to disconnect it, you're going to quarantine it immediately. Whereas with an insider, you really need to understand. I got a call from a CISO, of a large financial institution that used our product, and he said, Joe, I'm so angry with you. You gave my team a gun, and you didn't teach them how to use it. Because they had found a vice president who was exfiltrating data to a personal repository, think Dropbox. And what did they do? They did what they do with malware. They isolate, they disconnect, they quarantine, they cut him off the network, and then the next thing they do is they interrogated him. Why are you doing this? Why are you moving this information, etc.? Well, it turns out, instead of just asking the question, which is, hey, what's going on? Can we help you? He was going to do some work over the weekend. He was going to the Cape, and he felt like the easiest way for him to access his files is if he put them in Dropbox. Now, that wasn't a sanctioned way to do it. He was doing the wrong thing, but the way the security team hit him in the head, guess who got in trouble? The VP or the security team? Right, the security team is the one that got in trouble in that scenario. Okay, in a malware, security can always handle the response, but in insider risk, we often need HR, and we often might even need legal. It is never accidental when somebody from the outside breaks into your organization to take your data, but it is often, usually about 55% of the time, it is accidental when you have data leave your enterprise from one of your own employees. You never spend any time educating the hackers. Hey, Fancy Bear, you guys really shouldn't be doing this kind of thing. That is not effective, okay? You're never going to do that. But the most effective response on an insider risk situation is actually to educate your employees, because it tells them two things. First of all, we got eyes on you. We know when you're doing something you shouldn't do, and they always tell their peers. So you see this huge ripple effect when you actually catch someone in the act and you educate them. You get a ripple effect across the entire organization that reduces the amount of events and things that you have. And now maybe something a little more personal to the people in the room. If you don't act quickly on a malware or ransomware issue, you can get fired, and maybe rightly so. But if you overreact on an insider threat issue, you can actually get fired also. So it's a dangerous place to play. On the legal issues, it's the same way. We have no hesitation about the legal issues when somebody comes into our networks or onto one of our machines. But listen, the legal issues are all over the map on insider threat. And so you have to be a lot more careful. And then, the thing about us, all of us who've been in security a long time, we're all like, we know what we're doing. We have lots of experience. We've done this forever. But it turns out, like in the new modern era where we're also rolling out collaboration tools everywhere to our employees and encouraging them to use these collaboration. Yes, use Slack with our partners. Yes, share data on their Box drive, et cetera. We really all have to rethink how much experience we think we actually have. Okay, so now that you're acclimated back to the insider risk, that's what we're talking about today when we talk about source code exfiltration. So we're not talking about source code where somebody breaks into your source code repository. If somebody breaks into your source code repository, you've done a poor job, full stop, like you've got lots of other issues. But the people that are getting into your source code repository every single day to pull data and work on that, these are the people that represent the biggest risk to your IP. Now, we did a whole bunch of research on this area, and we interviewed 700 security professionals. Now, I hope you go ooh-ah to that, because do you know how hard it is to get 700 security professionals either on the phone or to answer any kind of email? That's like almost impossible. I was at a presentation yesterday at Piper Sandler, and they were like, we interviewed 100 people. And I was like, well, okay, if you interview 100 people, the data may or may not be good. I promise you when you interview 700, this is great data. Here's what they said. 60% of them said, I am using data today in my current job that I took from my last job. So we didn't just ask them, hey, are you going to possibly take data? We asked them, are you using data that you took from your prior role? And 60% said yes. So this problem is a frequent problem. It's also a costly problem. Okay, we talked to folks and said, okay, if you have a real breach, if data actually gets out in the wild and somebody goes and starts using that data, one of your ex-employees, for example, or a contractor, what is this going to cost you to get it back, to resolve the situation, et cetera? $15 million is the estimate. 1 in 3 breaches today involves an insider, okay? And about half of those are intentional or malicious. Now, you might be thinking, well, Joe, it's only 1 in 3. Like, why is that such a big deal? Think about it. When somebody from the outside gets their hands on your source code, they may or may not, likely not, know what to do with it, how to work it, what it does, how can they make it effective. But when the person that wrote that source code takes it and stands up a competitor to you or goes to one of your main competitors, they know exactly what that source code does, they know exactly how it works, and they know exactly the advantages that it brings. So those 1 in 3 are actually the most devastating of all changes, of all exfiltrations that you see out there. Now here's the other thing that I think is probably why you all are in the room. And can I just say thank you for being here? Because I did notice there was a whole AI session across the hall, and they were lined up down the street to go to the AI session. And so what I love about everybody that's here is that you're here to solve a problem that's happening today, that's relevant today, and that's not just in the news. Most companies today, 90%, have an average of 3 solutions to solve these problems, and yet all of them reported, but we're still having lots of data leakage. And the reason they're having lots of data leakage is the risks, the exfiltration vectors that people can take data continue to grow. They're just constantly growing. And we have open networks. We have people working from home. We have people that are working from Starbucks. We have people that don't get onto the VPN when they're working. And so they're exfiltrating source code, as I mentioned in my story, using Git commands. They're airdropping themselves events when they're off the network. They don't even have to be on the internet to airdrop themselves that information. We're seeing people, particularly salespeople, exfiltrate our customer list right out of Salesforce onto their personal devices. And then it's as easy as just going into your OneDrive account and publicly sharing a document and then pulling that off from one of your personal devices. So we see, again, lots of ways that exfiltration is occurring. And so we need systems and process to manage that. Now, let's talk about source code in particular. So protecting source code was the number 2 reason cited in that study of 700 plus folks, only behind their research data. And if you look at the stuff on the right there, it says, what is the impact of an insider risk event that you might have? And of course, no surprise, your reputation, business continuity, company culture, ability to compete, employee retention. And what's interesting is from 2022 to 2023, all of those things are increasing. Everyone's like, it's getting even worse. I'm worried about the impact, except one, and that's compliance. Now, the way I read that is, look, we all know in security, compliance is our best friend and our worst enemy at the same time, right? It's our best friend because it helps us get budget, but it's also, we all know that like a lot of times we do things for compliance that aren't really making us more secure. And the way I read this data is you all the professionals here in the room today and the professionals that answered this survey are saying, look, these things are real and growing, these impacts to us, and it's less about me solving a compliance problem. I actually want to solve the problem itself. And we hear that time again. So, also, we have the source code is the number 1 area where people say, I need more visibility. So that source code sent to repositories ranks 9 out of 10 people say, I don't have enough visibility into that. I can't see when my employees are pushing data to open source projects. That's something that really surprised us when we eventually did create the software that watches for Git command movement of data, was we expected to find lots of personal repos being used because we have developers, and so we know how the developers think about these things, and so we knew we'd see that a lot. What we didn't expect to find was people pushing data to open source projects that were not sanctioned. So all of us, I hope, contribute to the open source community. It's a great part of what we do, and Code 42 is a very active open source contributor. However, we have sanctioned open source projects we're helping on, and then apparently we also have shadow ones that we're doing, and shadow ones are no good. So that's a big area that we're seeing, and that's part of the visibility that people want to see. Okay, so why has it been challenging for folks? What is the reason that source code is difficult? Well, first, it is hard. Let's just acknowledge that out of the gate. And it starts with the breadth of tools. There are so many tools and libraries that can be used to move data around, and that creates a huge complexity for folks that are trying to secure that data. And so you need to be able to see where data came from, or that source code came from, via pull, clone, fetch, and then you also need to see exactly where it's going. But the most difficult part of the process is that you need to do this. You need to do this without impacting the performance of the software developer's machine. And I'm talking a lot about source code. I probably should have said, we service a lot of software companies. We're a software company. But what we found is that there are almost every organization in the world is writing software. It doesn't matter if you're a beer distributor. It doesn't matter if you're a retailer. It's people are writing code in just about every business possible. But the one thing a security organization cannot do is slow down the development team. I was talking to one of our customers who has 150 developers, and I asked him, I said, how many developers are we allowed to slow down? Like, how many developers' machines can we throttle? Anyone want to guess what the answer was? It was 0. Exactly. You all know this. You cannot. If you slow down one developer's machine, it is a shit show. That's a technical term for you, because then it's the whole program's terrible, etc. Now, this is particularly hard when you're looking at things like Git commands, because software developers are using those commands every day, 4, 5, 6 times a day to push, pull, clone code. to push it back into our repositories, right? I mean, if you're using Agile, you might be putting production software out 50, 40 times a week, right? And so think about all your developers moving that data into your repositories. If you, in the name of security and doing your job, get in the way of one of those developers, a couple things happens. First, they probably won't complain right away. They'll just take it off their machine, do everything they can to take it off their machine. Or they'll complain to their boss, and their boss will complain to your boss, and then we have the problem that we were talking about. And part of that is, first part of the complexity was look at all the ways and all the tools that folks have in order to do things. And I don't know, every developer does, well, you all know the answer. I'm not even going to ask that question, is every developer has their own set of tools. And there's no company that I've ever heard of who has any number of software developments like, you must use only these tools. Every developer brings their set of tools, and they think they have the best set of tools. And our job is we have to monitor all of them. So this is part of the complexity that we address in this space. But when you have all those tools, you just have tons of blind spots. And it's why 9 out of 10 of our survey respondents said, okay, well, you have all these blind spots. Let's figure out how the heck we need help in solving this. So one of the things that we talk about at Code 42, by the way, I want you to appreciate this slide. So as a CEO of the company, I have this, a great respect and rivalry with my chief marketing officer, and I always love her, and she's great. Sometimes she puts things in my slides just to see if I'm paying attention. And so there's a line in this slide that says visibility limits effectiveness. And I think she put that in there just to see if I was paying attention, and she got me because I wasn't. And I didn't see this until they had already submitted them to RSA. So I don't know what that means. I would just tell all of you in the audience that visibility does not limit your effectiveness. And so I was going to think about seeing if you noticed that in the slide to see like, hey, are they paying attention? But I just want to out myself right out of the gate, and that visibility is actually what we're looking for in this environment. And what this slide is meant to sort of articulate is that all of us in security have a set of risks that we know about, and we can write policies for and rules for. And the real challenge in an insider threat situation is to be able to cover all data movement in your enterprise and look for things that you don't know about. And that's what risk is all about. What do I mean by that? That means we're going to watch data move all throughout the enterprise, and instead of trying to be those people that write a policy for every time a piece of data moves or every time somebody moves source code to some location, that we score that. And by scoring that, we can determine, is this a super risky event or not a super risky event? Why is this important? It's super important in source code exfiltration, because your rule that says they cannot move source code to an untrusted repo sounds like, well, that sounds very reasonable. You know how many repos the development team is standing up on a regular basis? And what if they set up a new repo? And what if you have a partner that you're working with and they need to push source code to them, et cetera? What we have learned is that if you try to lock down source code movement, it won't take 3 days before somebody's in your office and you're turning the whole program off, okay? Because you are going to get in the way of some legitimate activity that's happening unintentionally by you because your rule wasn't good enough. And then what you'll do, because this is what we do in security, you'll try to write the rule better, and then 3 days later someone else will go up. And so instead of following that process, we think the right way to do it is to watch all source code movement across all the vectors that it goes, look about where it came from, look who's moving it, and score that based on all that information that we know, and then serve back to security, hey, here are the people that you may want to go talk to. So again, notice we're not going to get in the way of anybody in development. Listen, you're not getting in the way of them today. They're doing all this today, right? And so you're not making the situation any worse, but what you're doing is you're actually scoring all that risk that you don't know about in a way that helps you figure out where the real scary stuff is happening, and allows you, remember, this doesn't propagate. It allows you to go see Jenny Smith and say, Jenny, I noticed you moved some data to your your personal GitHub account. What's going on there? And Jenny's going to say, oh, yeah, I love keeping copies of my projects. And like, so Jenny, you're 28 years old. You graduated 2 years ago. When you joined us, you signed a whole bunch of documents. And one of them said, you really can't take our source code. And when we pay you to make it, we own it. And I swear to God, Jenny will say, really? And you'll say, yeah, that's the way it works. So Jenny, what I need you to do, we're going to sit with you right now. I need to get all of our source code out of your personal GitHub account or your GitLab account, and we're gonna pull that out, and you're not gonna do that anymore, right, Jenny? And Jenny's gonna go, okay. And by the way, you just saved Jenny her job. You also probably saved yourself your program because you didn't hit her over the head, and you solved the problem. Now, what's Jenny gonna do? She's gonna talk to everybody else on her team and say, listen what happened, and they're gonna go, oh my God. And that's what I mean by we educate, we score, we figure out where bad things are happening, we educate, and then we've always got eyes on everybody so that we can always know when somebody's moving something. But that's a much, much better way of handling the problem with the development team, and it gives you an opportunity to keep your tools and keep your sensors on their machines and active on their machines. Now, again, I know that you know about source code risk, but most of you will not have the visibility to track how it's getting out. I always like to throw a little story in here in the middle of it because I know some of you are thinking, I don't even know if any of this is real, but this is a real story, and it's not a good look for either Vallejo or NVIDIA. So Vallejo engineer downloaded the complete source code library for all of their advanced parking and driving assistance systems, brought it all to NVIDIA with him, and basically they have now found via a criminal investigation, that's a big deal, somebody called the cops and brought the FBI in, they found all of Vallejo's software on their NVIDIA computer. Now, I said, hey, NVIDIA has a role to play in this too. You might be like, why? It was their employee, they didn't do anything. Well, that's the problem, they didn't do anything. So two things happened. When that employee left, they should have reviewed all of the data that he had moved before he left. That's possible to do in today's tools. And you would have seen immediately, and we would have nipped that in the bud, and we'd have no criminal investigation, we'd have no multi-million-dollar lawsuit, we'd have no $15 million account. But the other thing that could have saved them is NVIDIA also should have a new employee watch list that every time a new employee starts, that we have a process in place that 30 days we go in and look at all the data that they have moved. Because guess what? When you're a new employee, you should not be bringing a thumb drive in, plugging it into your machine, or pulling data down from your Dropbox account and putting it on your corporate laptop of 50 gigs or 100 gigs of information. You're a new employee, you don't know anything. You shouldn't be bringing that data. They should have seen that. They could have caught it. They could have nipped it in the bud. They probably would have fired the employee right then and there, but they're going to end up firing the employee eventually. So you might as well get it over with earlier. But again, this is the kind of thing that happens. And if you're thinking, okay, well, it doesn't really happen that often. Actually, that data that I talked about earlier, the 700 folks, this data comes from our 180 billion data points at Code 42. 75% of all of our customers have seen source code leave their premises in the last 30 days. So there are 25% that didn't see it or didn't have source code exfiltration. But those are probably businesses that don't have a lot of source code. But 75% is a good number. And my guess is just about everybody in this room, because you came to this presentation, have source code. So you're going to see it in your enterprise. And the other thing that's really interesting question that we ask is, and I have this conversation continually with CISOs. We ask people, would you be held accountable if source code left? And 83% said yes, they would be held accountable. Now, the reason I bring that up is 56% of CISOs say that they think they're responsible for insider threat, data leaving the enterprise. Only 56. The other 44% said it's unclear who's responsible. And when we dug into that, they said, well, look, if a salesperson takes a bunch of data out of Salesforce, isn't that an HR problem? Isn't that a people issue? Like, we lock down the network. We locked down Salesforce. We made sure that person's identity was right. He had access to Salesforce. Is it really our fault, or is that more a culture, people issue? And so the thing about source code is that everybody in security, nobody I've talked to, no CISO I've ever spoken to thinks, oh, I'm not responsible for source code. Like, if source code leaves, you're losing your job. Like, if you have a big source code thing, everyone will rally around you for 3 to 4 months, but then you're going to lose your job. And so I find that it's the one thing that in security we can all agree, look, we have to solve this problem. Okay, so what do we do about it? Let's talk. I got a few recommendations and then a few short-term, long-term. And if you have any questions, we'll have time at the end for that. So one, we've talked about this a lot already. You must ensure that your solution is low endpoint impact or don't bother using it. This is probably, in my opinion, the reason that agents in particular have a bad rap on endpoints is 100% related to DLP. I think DLP agents were so bad 15 years ago that they constantly use 60, 70% of CPU, they hog all the memory, and so DLP as a industry is responsible for all of us hating agents. So listen, there are new tools out there in the world today, multiple ones here at the show, that instead are cloud native, and they use the cloud to do the analysis, and the agent is just a lightweight sensor on the endpoint that's gathering information. This is a much better way to do this, and a much more likely way for all of you to get the information you need without getting in the way of people. And the people that we're talking about today are your software engineers. And then monitoring needs to be broad. We've talked about this also. It needs to be client, IDE, and library agnostic. You need to cover all those processes that we talked about. And you know, you're going to find people in this space, if you look into it, that monitor git.exe, but that leaves so much visibility. So really look into the architecture of these folks. And then I can't talk about this one enough. I mean, when we were building our own insider threat product, I never envisioned that we would have to become an education company. So we have a product called Instructor that is just 1-minute short videos that aim to educate people as they're breaking the rules. It turns out nobody, we all know this, nobody watches the annual education videos we're supposed to watch. But when they upload something to Dropbox, and within a couple minutes we send them a Slack that says, through automation by the way, that says, hey, you uploaded something to Dropbox, you need to watch this video. They watch a 1-minute video that tells them why they're not allowed to put corporate data in Dropbox. That has an impact. The folks at CrowdStrike, who are one of our customers, they tested this. They did a controlled test. They found that they reduced their number of events by 32% across all vectors when they sent out one video on public sharing of information. So anybody that had a public, you know, in their case, G Drive link, they sent a video and say, don't do public G Drive link. And what it said to their organization is, we are watching what you do, and all of their incidents went down, even across Gmail, Dropbox, et cetera. So education works. Really, really important to course correct people. And that last point I hope you read, your organization is not going to fire all your developers, okay? And by the way, do you know how hard it is and expensive it is to find a good software developer? It's a lot more expensive than finding a good security person. Maybe, but it's close, right? So their first reaction isn't going to be, I'm firing Jenny. Their first reaction is, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? Why are you getting in the way? We're trying to build great things here, and you security people are always in the way. So the education makes you also a good person, right? Hey, we're just educating you. We're helping people. We're here to support you and get you going. And I encourage you, if you haven't seen, go to our website and look at one of the videos, or go to our booth and look, because the videos are shocking. And when I say they're shocking, the reason they're shocking is they're so nice. They're like, hey, I noticed that you loaded some data up into Gmail. You know, we're not supposed to use Gmail. And every time I show one of these to a CISO, they literally break into a grin because they're like, we would never be that nice. I go, I know. That's the point. You would never be this nice, but this works. This makes them the bad person, not you the bad person. And so it's actually funny to watch. Okay, and then obviously, like we're here to talk about source code, but we are seeing just a huge growth in data moving to Gen AI models, data being taken out of Salesforce. AirDrop, strangely, I guess people in the last like 2 years have figured out how to use AirDrop, because before, it's been around for a while, but nobody knew how to use it, and it has become a huge exfiltration vector. So these are all things that you wanna keep an eye on. Okay, this is my last slide, and then if you have questions, we'll take some questions. Okay, I kind of like this format. I give RSA credit when credit is due. So first, what should you do right now? Listen, talk to your peers about what they're doing to uncover source code theft without slowing down their developers' websites. That will make you feel better if you're looking for a solution, because most of your peers are like, huh, what, oh yeah, we've got that covered. If they move to a thumb drive, we've got them nailed. You're like, okay, but what if they move something to an open source project using Git commands? Yeah, we wouldn't see that. And so you'll feel better that most people do not have this covered at all. Also, this sounds so simply obvious, but it wasn't until I asked my own developer, well, how do you move data around, and where does it go, and where do you push source code today, that I really understood what they were doing. Ask one of your developers what they're doing. And the great thing about developers, they'll tell you. Like because most of them, if they're exfiltrating to their own person, they don't think they're doing anything wrong. So, we talked about that. There's a little bit of education that has to happen. So ask them. And ask them, of course, how they would move it. Okay? Now, what to do within the next 3 months? Obviously, I work for a vendor, so this is a little self-serving. That's breaking a rule to mention that I work for a vendor, but whatever. You guys figured that out. What we tell everyone is, don't believe anyone's claims. Now, there's a company, some of you have heard of them, called Microsoft. Now, Microsoft makes, every time you talk to them about one of their products, they will tell you, oh, it does this, it's fully integrated, it does that, etc. They're the ultimate example of like, pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. So we have a strong recommendation on that second point, that you conduct a POC every time, and not in your lab. This is the mistake we make as security professionals. We like to do everything in the lab. You cannot do that with insider risk. You know why? You guys aren't the ones exfiltrating all the data, okay? And you don't see how it's going to operate in the wild, okay? You need to, I know you're all going to put it in your lab anyway, but you need to get it out of your lab and put it on 20 endpoints, including, and I recommend, people say, where should we put it? I say, put it on 10 software engineers and put it on 10 salespeople. And I promise you, you will find exfiltration, just 10. You don't have to have more than 10, and run it for 2 weeks. And you will see salespeople taking data that they shouldn't to places that they shouldn't, and you will see software engineers moving source code to places that they shouldn't. And you will also get to see that it doesn't disrupt any of their machines, okay? And that's not a big deal with salespeople because they don't use their machines at all, but it is a big deal with software engineers, okay? And that'll help you figure out, again, on the workflow. So simple next steps. If you come see Code 42, we're down in the north end with a big booth, big sign, lots of machines that show you how it works. And I think you'd be stunned if you come and look at our product, because it's so easy to identify where the source code is going and where it's coming from. Okay, I have left myself 10 minutes. If there are questions, I would love it. It's a good opportunity for the audience to learn from all of us. If you're really shy and you don't want to ask any questions, I will be in the hallway afterwards to answer any questions. Oh, I've got one. Oh, I love it. I'll start.
So I noticed that you used, for your example, a recent college graduate. As Gen Z enters the workforce, do you foresee like changes based off of how these people grew up compared to people working now with insider risk, and like how would you adjust like educating them?
The answer is yes, I do. So I also own 2 Gen Zers myself that are now in the workforce, and the level of naivete. My son is a software engineer who's 24. I guess he's 25 now, and the level of naivete on some things is incredible. Meaning they don't really understand who owns intellectual property or where it goes, and honestly, they shouldn't be expected to. But I'll tell you where they're great. I once told my son, hey, do you have a thumb drive? And he said, what are you talking about? I don't even know what that means. I don't know what that is. The thing about Gen Z is they're cloud native. So they've always been in the cloud, all of their data is in the cloud, and they know how to move data around in the cloud better than all of us. And so I promise you that they are using the most modern tools to push data in different places. And so, yes, they represent a slightly larger risk, not because they're more malicious. It's because I really don't believe they are in any way. I just think they're less educated on what IP is, and they're more capable at using modern technologies. So good question. Thank you. I also love the first person who's brave enough to ask a question. Anybody else have a question that they'd like to ask or share, or a story? Come on, tell a story about how you had data exfiltration in your environment. Yes?
Would you mind come up to the aisle monitor mic so that everyone can hear?
RSA's got, they got the rules.
Hi. How do you integrate with other insider risk protection tools that they have out in the market?
Do you have anything, any area in particular that you're thinking about?
Purview?
Purview, okay. Yeah.
And similar.
Yeah. So a couple things. So Purview is the Microsoft version. You don't work for Microsoft, do you? No, okay, just checking. I didn't want to offend anybody. Purview is the Microsoft conglomeration of tools that they've named it. It has a name, but it is not a product. It is lots of different products that you put together. What we do with Microsoft, if you've done tagging of data, like you have MIPS tags, Microsoft Information Protection tags on your data, we will ingest all that data, and most of the tools will, to add it to the metadata of the stream. So again, big believer in being an open platform that integrates with everything. Again, I'm not supposed to talk about my company here. We do have 30+ integrations, and we use Tines under the hood so we can integrate with just about everything out there. So a big believer in getting as much data in a location as possible to build that risk model, to build all of that risk assessment. Again, it's a very different approach than what you're used to in insider threat, where in DLP, you try to tag data, you try to classify it, and then you try to write a bunch of rules to block that data from moving. We don't do any of that. We score all data movement. We score it from a risk standpoint based on where it's going, where it came from, who's moving that data, and what type of data is it. And by doing that, we don't get in the way of anybody doing their jobs, but we let the security people know where the bad things are happening. So it's a different model, but boy, will you love having it, because no one is yelling at you guys, but you're able to see things that you'll have visibility into things that you've never had before. And visibility is good, right? We established that on that slide earlier. Other questions? We have about 1 minute left. You guys have been a fantastic audience. Thank you all for coming. I will be in the hallway afterwards. If you want to ask me anything, I'll stick around for a couple of minutes. But thank you very much for your time, and have a fantastic RSA.